We do have different ways to create these tests. We have Architect, which is a point-and-click recording solution. It enables teams to simply walk through the application and generate these end-to-end flows, very similar in a way to traditional record and playback approaches. Then we also have our Create agent. This is a prompt-based test creation tool that allows teams to take natural language prompts and use those to generate end-to-end flows. And one of the unique benefits here, pairing this with our cloud execution services, is we can actually generate these tests in parallel. So that means we can actually achieve the application coverage much faster than if we were to use a traditional point-and-click approach, or especially a coded approach either. But regardless of how we create these tests, these user flows are going to be stored and executed from this cloud environment. And the reason we do this is we do take quite a unique view when interacting with applications. If we kind of think about the traditional testing approach, even many low-code solutions rely on Selenium or traditional selectors under the hood. So for example, if we're looking at something like our Salesforce login prompt here, what we would do is use something like the name attribute or some other specific attribute from that element to target it. But that introduces some problems. One, it can be quite difficult to build these out, especially against more bespoke or complex SaaS applications that we see in the market. But this also can actually introduce many maintenance issues. As our applications evolve over time, those selectors change, and it causes a huge burden on teams to maintain them long term. And so what we do here instead is we actually take this data-driven view of every application state. And we feed this information into our machine learning AI model, a proprietary modeling set that we've had in teams' hands prior to kind of wide use of ChatGPT. And what we do is for every element on the page, we're actually going to capture about 200 features or attributes, regardless of whether we interact with those elements or not. We take that information, weigh it against each other for every step of our test to make more intelligent decisions as we're executing our workflows. This allows us to self-heal our tests with much higher levels of accuracy. We can use this information to autonomously generate tests based off very simple requirements, which I'll show in a moment. And we can also use this information for things like autonomous test diagnostics using our diagnostics agent. We can maintain these tests using that agent. And we can also document everything that's been covered here without teams having to go through that manual process. So reducing a lot of the burden from all the way from creation, maintenance, and even documentation of the workflows that we're creating here. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in and see what this looks like in practice. And we'll kind of follow this from the left to the right here, looking at this architecture diagram here. We'll look at how we can create these tests, and we'll talk a little bit more about what's going on behind the scenes as we generate these end-to-end flows. And then we'll look at how we can support these tests and some of the unique tools that we have available based on this approach that we're taking here for test creation. Let's go ahead and jump in though, and what I'll do is open one of our sample projects, and we'll open the Create agent, which is, again, only one of two different ways we can create these end-to-end tests. But we'll kind of start here as it is really the industry-leading approach. Many solutions are looking to shift away from record and playback or coded tools, but the data that we're capturing allows us to actually take much higher level objectives and use those to generate full end-to-end tests here. In this case, we're going to go ahead and use Salesforce. Salesforce makes a really interesting example because it's typically quite difficult to automate against. There are many features such as shadow DOMs, embedded iframes, dynamic elements, and so the selector-driven approach can be hard to support. But it's also an application that's a SaaS service, so that means that they can actually deploy changes at any point that could break the tests that we already have built out. And so we'll also take a look at how we can support that as well. Let's go ahead and build out our prompt here. And let's say to start that we have an authentication flow that we need to handle, something repetitive that we actually see across numerous different tests, whether it's logging in, handling pop-ups, really anything that we see as part of a repetitive test here. What we can do is we can actually call what we call a page object to support that reusable set of steps. So what I can do here is I can say use page object. and select this reusable set of steps that I've created to handle the entire authentication process. So this means teams don't have to actually rewrite prompts for things that you're seeing used across numerous different tests, and can really make the entire creation process much easier here. And then what we'll also do here is we'll add our actual expectation for the test itself. And traditionally, prompting would require very detailed steps where every interaction is going to be documented here. Instead, what we can do with this tool is take much higher level objectives and use those to actually generate this end-to-end test. So let's say we want to go ahead and create a new object, in this case, a new lead. What I can say is create a new lead, let's say with tomorrow's date. And what this simple instruction provided here will do is it will go to the new leads page, open up the form, fill out all the required fields, and then use a date picker to select tomorrow's date as well. Something that's pretty tricky to do even with record and playback tools. And then let's also add an expectation here too. So let's say, and then verify the status is new once saved. So as you can see, this is a much higher level objective and expectation for the prompt. Very similar to the way that we would give information to a manual QA team member to automate these end-to-end flows. We can provide that same higher level of detail as opposed to very static explicit steps for these prompts and get these results out using this create agent. Now we can be as explicit as we want. We can add specific data points and other information for this flow. But I think this is a pretty interesting example of using something really as a higher level objective and letting the agent do a lot of the work here.